Hey everyone, my name is Lizzie and today we'll be talking about fermentation temperatures and how this can affect the taste of your alcohol. In the middle of this heat wave, I thought to myself, might as well talk about fermentation temperatures. So if you weren't aware, higher temperature during fermentation can cause off flavors. Off flavors meaning that your alcohol tastes maybe a little bit more bitter. There's some flavors that you weren't expecting to have. It has a sort of medicinal taste. So it's very important to look, if this applies to your yeast package, to look behind the yeast package and to see what is the optimal temperature that the yeast performs in. So I have packages here. We have Rum Turbo that produces up to 15% alcohol, and it suggests to leave the fermentation between 20 to 30 degrees Celsius or 68 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So among these words, you'll be able to see it in the back of the package. And speaking of off flavors, we have the famous turbo yeast, classic turbo yeast that produces up to 20% alcohol. And this is what the back looks like, with a lot of information as well. And it suggests to have temperatures between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius or 86 Fahrenheit and 104 Fahrenheit. We also have wine yeast, or EC 1118, which is here. And the back of it has recommendations as well. So the back says between 35 to 37 degrees Celsius or 95 to 98.6 Fahrenheit. And we also have daddy yeast. And as you can see the back here, there are no instructions. So not all yeast packages come with temperature recommendations. However, George from the YouTube channel Barley and Hops, he suggests that when using daddy yeast, it's best to have fermentation temperatures of 26 degrees Celsius or 78 degrees Fahrenheit. When the temperature gets warmer than that, the yeast gets stressed, and stressed yeast leads to off flavors. So that's what causes weird medicinal tastes. So someone lately asked me what type of yeast do I use, and I could say that I started with turbo yeast. I started off with turbo yeast and I started reading comments on Facebook groups, and a lot of people were mentioning off flavors. So I personally didn't taste any off flavors until a certain point, and that's when I decided to move to EC 1118 yeast, this one here. And now what I use is the daddy yeast. So the EC 1118 and the daddy yeast, for me, they don't have off flavors and they produce the same percentage of alcohol roughly. It's just that this one here is specifically for wine. So since I don't have any fruits, or since I don't mash fruits, I tend to use the daddy yeast. But honestly, if you're looking for a yeast recommendation, both are good. If you want to do a wash and you're short on time, it's best to use turbo yeast. It might get you your alcohol quicker. There's even a 24-hour turbo yeast. I've also tried rum turbo yeast. So if you want to make rum, you can use that specifically in order to have the rum flavors. That's after distilling, of course. And for all these yeasts, you can look at the description below. You'll have links where you can purchase them. Speaking of yeast, do we need yeast nutrients in a heat wave or in really hot weather? Because yeast is already active when it's hot, so it shouldn't need any extra nutrients to help invigorate its process. For me, really hot is above 29 degrees Celsius or 84 degrees Fahrenheit. So drop a comment below if you use yeast nutrients when it's really hot. I'm not sure if we have anyone from hot places around the world. Let me know if you've done a past batch during a heat wave. Do you add yeast nutrients to help the yeast, or do you just make your wash without it? So based on the yeast, you're gonna have different optimal temperature because each yeast is different. And I also like to mentioned that yeast have a mind of their own, so you never know how they're going to react depending on the temperature, the environment. They're wild cards, as I mentioned in previous videos. So you can have exactly the same ingredients but yield different results because the yeast have a big part in the taste, the color, and the flavor of your alcohol. So what does this mean for the home brewer or the winemaker, anyone making alcohol? This means that it's best to avoid a varying temperature in the first 3 days of the fermentation. This is the most crucial to the yeast. That's when they get settled in. That's when they start getting familiar with their environment, and the most fermentation happens at the beginning. So fermentation is fastest towards the beginning and it slows down at the end. So for the first 3 days, you want to make sure it's in a stable environment, stable temperature. And this is important because my last wash, I started it and a few days later we were in a heat wave. So that affected the temperature of the wash. A little bit about that later. But first, I just want to talk about a study that was done on a researcher asked participants to taste 2 different types of alcohol, and both alcohol fermented at various temperatures. And this study yielded 3 results. So the first one is that when the temperature was high, there are less yeast that survived. So this can be explained by the yeast dying when it's too hot. Second result is that a higher temperature made the alcohol taste more medicinal. So we talked about this earlier. It has little off flavors that are produced when the temperatures are too high. And I just want to put a parenthesis here to talk about my last wash. So the last wash was fermenting during the heat wave. So I did taste a little bit of bitterness, but I'm not sure if it was because of the various temperature change. Day 1, there was no heat wave versus day 2 or 3, it was significantly hotter in the room. Or was it due to rum turbo yeast? So I know that turbo yeast has been associated with off flavors, but does that apply to rum turbo? Or is it just the classic turbo? So if you've used rum turbo in the past, let me know in the comments below if you've had off flavors, or if you use different sorts of yeast. Have you noticed that it's only turbo yeast that yields off flavors, or anything with the word turbo in it has a bad taste? So let me know in the comments below. And the third result from the study, so the first one was that there are less yeast that survived. Second was that the beer tasted more medicinal. And third result was that there was a higher concentration of esters when the temperature was higher. So for esters, I talked about this in another video. It's a sort of byproduct that happens from fermentation. It happens when there are sort of flavors that come out of the alcohol fermentation. So we're not talking about flavors by putting fruits in or by putting extract. It's just natural flavors that form from the yeast eating the sugar in the environment that it's in. And in the study, they said that a slight increase in temperature increases your amount of esters by a lot. So more specifically, if they increase the temperature from 10 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius, they found that there was 75% more ester concentration inside the wash, which is a lot. It's shocking. 75%. But I think that some brewers like esters because it gives a sort of character. It's a sort of fruity flavor. So drop a comment below. Let me know if esters is a good thing for you, or would you rather avoid this at all costs? You'd rather have maybe a more sweet, or are you the type to like different flavors coming out of your home brew? So that was the video for today. If you found this valuable, share it with a friend. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.